Okay, I'm going to try and keep this to 10 minutes and finish this part in 10 minutes, but there's a lot of information here. So if it takes longer than 10 minutes, it takes longer than 10 minutes, and there will be a second video. All right, so the powers of the state and national government. All right, so this is big, important stuff here. Make sure you pay attention to these slides. All right, so the national government has only those powers delegated to it by the Constitution. Those are called delegated powers, or enumerated powers, or expressed powers. Sometimes you might see it said express powers. Okay, so those are the only powers the Constitution has. The national government has are those given directly to it by the Constitution, typically called delegated powers. Exception, inherent powers over foreign affairs. We'll talk about that in a minute. Inherent power essentially means powers the government has just for being a government, just existing. Aren't a lot of those. Won't see a lot of that, but we'll talk about it. So the national government is supreme. Supremacy clause tells us that. Article 6. State governments have the powers not delegated to the central government unless they're denied by the Constitution. So, national government has only the powers delegated to it by the Constitution. State governments have everything not mentioned in the Constitution. Okay, anything not mentioned in the Constitution. If something could be mentioned in the Constitution that is denied to the states or denied to the national government. So that's still mentioned in the Constitution. So it's not mentioned in the Constitution. That's a state power. Those are called reserved powers. Okay, and so again, then there's some denied powers, denied to both of them. Some denied just to the states. Some denied specifically just to the national government. Okay, so here we go. National government's powers, like you said, express or expressed, delegated, enumerated, any of those terms mean the same thing. Those are the powers directly stated in the Constitution. They belong to the national government. Look at Article 1, Section 8. There's a whole list of things. Those are the powers delegated or expressed or enumerated to Congress. Okay. There is something called implied powers. They're not directly stated in the Constitution. They're implied. This comes from the necessary and proper clause, sometimes called the elastic clause because it stretches. Okay, but it's the necessary and proper clause because Congress can also make all laws that they think are necessary and proper to carry out their constitutional powers. In other words, carry out their delegated powers. An example, the military draft. The Constitution doesn't say that Congress can hold a draft. The national government can hold a draft. However, it says that Congress can create an army or a navy. And as we see later on, Air Force, things like that. So Congress deemed it necessary and proper, both those things, to be able to create that army, that navy, that military through a draft. Okay, so the draft is an implied power. Space program is not in there, but I mean, if Congress can control these other programs and all, then it would seem that they would be able. It would be necessary and proper for them to do space, nuclear power plant regulation, a lot of stuff that didn't exist when the Constitution was written, end up being taken care of by the necessary and proper clause, sometimes called the elastic clause. Okay, inherent powers, hardest one to understand, the one you'll be asked the least about, though. Okay, and like I said, that's the power of the national government, essentially because it's a government, and it typically deals with foreign affairs, like diplomatic relations, control of immigration. The Louisiana Purchase is a great example of an inherent power. It doesn't say anywhere in the Constitution that the president can buy land, but if the government can get new land from winning a war and a treaty, or they can, essentially just take over new land, why shouldn't they be able to buy it from another country? So that's an inherent power. Okay. The national government has ultimate authority over the states. And there are really 4 reasons. The most important one is the constitutional one, which is number 1. Article 6, Supremacy Clause. Constitution shall be the supreme law of the land. Okay. State, doesn't matter what a state law is, it doesn't go above the Constitution. Okay. 2, the war power. The national government can sit there and declare like martial law essentially in a state. Fly zones, use airports during war or peace, things like that. And so that's something states can't do. 3, second biggest one after one, probably. The power to regulate interstate commerce. Congress has used this authority to do a lot of things that are not in the Constitution, that they do not have power based on the Constitution. And the Supreme Court historically has allowed them to do that, starting with Gibbons v. Ogden. That's a big, important case there, and its importance comes from it establishing the broad authority of the interstate commerce clause. Interstate, between states, commerce, trade. So trade between states. Okay, and Congress used that for everything from. One of the biggest things they use it for is that's how they actually. That's how civil rights actually were legislated by Congress. There's nowhere that Congress has the power to make people be nice to different races, different peoples, but they can, based on interstate commerce, sit there and say, hey, you can't discriminate against a different race if you want to trade between states. That was a big case too, Heart of Atlanta Motel. We'll talk about that later. 4, the power to tax and spend. This is a big part here. So Congress can't pass laws to promote general welfare, but they can raise taxes and they can spend money. And that money is how they get states to do a lot of things that states have the power to do and the national government doesn't. Okay, 2 ways they can do that. One is they pass a mandate. If the government has a power, a constitutional power to do something, they can make a state do it. Right there, federal mandate, a requirement the national government imposes as a condition for receiving federal funds. So the government can say, hey, if you want this money, you have to do this. Okay, mandate. Okay, but a mandate doesn't have to be about money either. A mandate just means the federal government can make a state or make someone do something because they have the constitutional authority to do so. The government, a lot of times, the way the national government gets states and gets to do something is through money. But if it's a mandate, they can make you do it and they don't have to pay you for it either. That's called an unfunded mandate. Okay, so just some powers of the national government there. There are more than these. These are just some of the biggest ones. You can see there treaties, import taxes, regulate interstate commerce. I mentioned that one. Declare war. Remember, specifically, Congress declares war. Coin money, punish counterfeiters, fix standard weights, naturalize citizens, create post offices, raise an army, grant copyrights. Remember, raising an army is their constitutional power, a delegated power. The draft, however, is the implied power that comes from that. Okay, so powers of the state government, all powers of the state government are called reserve powers. They come from the 10th Amendment. They're powers reserved to the states by the 10th Amendment. Any power not specifically constitutionally given to the national government is a power belonging to the states. So lots of stuff's done in there, creating schools, local governments, election laws. All those things are up to the states. Marriage laws, as we saw up until the summer with the Supreme Court, those were things that were allowed, that states were able to decide. Now, one thing that states can't do is they can't burden commerce with taxes among the states. So they couldn't tax the national government. That's McCulloch versus Maryland. They can't tax another state's commerce, things of that nature. Okay, some powers that state governments have. They license professionals, teachers, doctors, dentists, lawyers. They regulate the sale of alcoholic beverages. Until a few years ago, Georgia was one of 2 states left that didn't allow alcohol sales on Sunday. All states are different. Regulate trade within a state. Notice the word intrastate commerce, not interstate. Interstate, between states. Intrastate, within a state. That's a very tiny window, though. Most commerce is not intrastate anymore. Regulate marriage and divorce. As we said, that kind of is something that started to change this summer, at least. Regulate gambling. That's why you can gamble in, say, Nevada, Las Vegas, and make traffic regulations. In some states you can't turn right on red. Most of them you can. Speed limits are different in different states. Let's see. Concurrent powers. Those are powers that both the national and state governments have at the same time. Both the state and national governments collect taxes. Nowadays, both the state and national government fund and regulate education. No Child Left Behind is a national law, okay? But states are really in charge of most education stuff and enforcing laws, okay? The national government has laws they enforce. State government has laws they enforce. You can actually break federal